Good afternoon, everybody out there in Zoom land. I'm Olympia Mayor Cheryl Selby. I want to welcome you on behalf of the Olympia City Council and staff to the City of Olympia's first virtual town hall. This is the first in a series of 4 town halls on racial justice hosted by the Olympia City Council. Tonight's town hall will be focusing on racial justice and the justice system. At this time, I'd like to introduce my council, so you guys can just wave when I mention your name. I've got our Mayor Pro Tem, Jessica Bateman. All right, I've got Councilmember Lisa Parsley, Councilmember Danny Madrone, Councilmember Renata Rollins, who's outside. I like that backdrop. I think that's real. And then Councilmember Clark Gilman. And Councilmember Jim Cooper was unable to join us for this one, but he will be joining us for the upcoming town halls. I'd like to just note that this is a pretty remarkable way to try to have difficult conversations. It's not ideal that we can't be in person, but Zoom has made it possible for possibly more people to attend. We've had up to 400 people sign up for this very first town hall. That's just the most we've ever had sign up for certainly any of our other city meetings. So it's kind of a blessing and a challenge to have Zoom, but it's also, like I said, makes it more accessible for a lot of people to participate. So that's the good news. I also want to, I'm taking a look at this long list of people that signed up, and I want to just call out that we have the police chiefs from Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey, and the Thurston County Sheriff listening in this afternoon. We also have numerous judges, not just municipal judges, but superior and district court judges listening in, numerous nonprofit leaders I am seeing on this list, as well as current and former elected officials from across the county. So welcome everybody, and I want to thank as well Kellie Braseth at this time. This was her brainchild and she pulled it together very quickly, and we are just so honored to have such esteemed panelists joining us, and she'll introduce those folks here in a minute. The goal of the virtual town halls is to provide a safe gathering space for the community to learn and understand the issues at the center of institutional racism and the opportunities for positive change driven by the Black Lives Matter movement. And now I'll turn my unofficial gavel over to our Strategic Communications Director, Kellie Braseth.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. Council members, first of all, I want to thank you for your trust in me when we came up with this crazy idea and you said, sure, go for it. I want you to know how much that means to me. Thank you. So we do have an incredible panel before you. I'm going to just do a brief little calling of names, and I'll introduce folks in more depth in just a minute. Larry Jefferson, Supervising and Senior Attorney for Superior Courts, Thurston County Public Defense. Dr. Thelma Jackson, co-founder of the Black Alliance of Thurston County and many other things, and David Owens, among other of the many esteemed things he does. He is a staff attorney for the Exoneration Project. I want to, in speaking to you guys, I want to say that I can't thank you enough for showing up for this conversation. I think I might have mentioned that I was having like this little nightmare. I woke up in the night and nobody showed up except me. You know, I've had great conversations with you all around this issue, and I've always come away impressed with your commitment and your passion and your expertise on this topic. And you're some of the smartest people I know. And just for the folks who are watching, I want to just sort of orient you a little bit. This conversation, this event will take about 90 minutes. We're spending about 90 minutes here. And you're going to hear briefly from all of our panelists individually. I want you to know that this is being recorded. and it will be posted on our website, but also it is being recorded by TC Media, and they will rebroadcast it on Channel 3. Also important to know that this is a hard topic, and our panelists bring their expertise and their honesty to the table. So I want to let you know to not be surprised if some of what you hear makes you uncomfortable, if some of what you hear challenges your worldview. I suspect that all of our worldviews have some blind spots, and it's probably healthy for us to know what's going on in those. But what's most important is that you're here, you came to listen, and that's appreciated. I applaud your presence and your willingness to be here. I'm going to start by, there was a small friendly discussion about who gets to go first, and Dr. Jackson won. So I'll start by introducing, yes.
I hate to interject at all, but
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out whether council members should just turn off their video so that the only faces that are really seen are the panelists right now, because we want to profile the panel, not our faces. All right, so can I get a show of like consensus with council? Is that okay if we, okay. And then I'll call you back in at the end when you guys, for closing comments. All right.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Right. So, Dr. Thelma Jackson, she is the owner of Foresight Consultants. She has served on many task force and advisory councils for 5 governors for the state of Washington. She served in numerous leadership capacities over the years. She's been the president of the Washington State School Directors Association. She's been a member for 20 years and the president 5 times of the North Thurston School Board. She's been the president of the Pacific region of the National School Boards Association, the chair of the State Advisory Council on Vocational Education, the chairperson of the Washington State Legislative Ethics Board, the chair of the Commission on African American Affairs, and president of the Board of Trustees of the Evergreen State College. She has, of course, served widely in our community and has been recognized with many awards and recognitions. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Biochemistry and a doctorate in Education, Leadership, and Change. She's been in this community for 52 years. And in the Olympia community specifically for 49 years. She and her husband, Nat, are proud parents of 3 children and grandparents of 4 granddaughters. And so I will turn it over to you and let you plant your flag in this conversation.
Thank you, Kellie. First of all, let me express my appreciation for being invited to be a part of this, what I think is going to be a historic setting public forum. I get to go first because I'm the oldest, dirt comes first. And so thank you, Larry, for acquiescing to that. But I appreciate being included on this forum because we are living in such a challenging time in this nation, in this world, and not only in this community. And I would just start off by saying that the events of this last month or so, the COVID-19 pandemic that has revealed with fierce clarity the systemic inequality that affects every aspect of life. This urgent wake-up call has been compounded and amplified by the more recent killings of far too many Black men and women. This loss of life, safety, and opportunity is not a coincidence. It extends back to the founding of our country. Racism is everywhere. It's everyone's problem, and we must work together to address it. And that certainly includes racial justice and the justice system. And as I was sitting here listening to you kind of run through that bio for me, Kellie, I was thinking in terms of so many of the places I've been and tables I've been at and discussions I've been a part of. and opportunities to talk about the structural inequalities that exist within our society. And many of the things have gone unnoticed, unacknowledged, unrecognized until now. And I often think about why now? Why all of these things converging at once? And I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's coincidental. And as a result of having been quarantined as a society, we had a chance to get still and to listen. And when we were exposed to that brutal murder of George Floyd, something happened to the consciousness of America. Something happened to the consciousness in our communities. And we began to ask questions and enter into dialogues that we've never had before. And it's been very, very interesting, some of the conversations I found myself in as a result of this series of activities going on. But now some things are being talked about that certainly aren't new, but they're being heard for the first time. Still not fully understood, but at least being heard. And when we talk about the structural inequalities that's been exposed through the COVID-19 virus, the lack of health care, the inequities, the low income, who are the representatives of those early responders, so forth and so on. And when we talk about this particular topic of racial justice and the racial system, rather the justice system, it all comes to play there as well. And so we can't talk about what's going on in this community with the issues the Black Lives Matter, protest and other kinds of things have brought to the forefront without talking about racial justice and the justice system, because we're seeing how little justice there has been. And it's one of those things that it's not new, but all of a sudden it's front and center. And for Black people and members of the Black community, we've been complaining for the last 400 years about the inequities, the injustice, the disparities. But for a number of reasons, and one being importantly, the fact that we are such a racial society and the structural inequalities are so intricately intertwined in this fabric we've woven that we call the American way. And it has become the norm to the point where these things were no longer noticed, were no longer paid any attention to. When we look at the prison industrial complex that's out there, when we look at so many of the things that's been contributing to it, that's feeding into it, and a lot of my work in the education system has settled on disproportionality and discipline, the school to prison pipeline, and how we have fed into the prison industrial complex. And we have to go from there looking at how all of this fits together. And this conversation is very important for this community. And I'm delighted to see that we arrive at a place where we're ready to start really talking about things and not just tinkering around the edge. And I hope it's not another fleeting moment, that we can really zero in on what's going to make a difference in this life, in this community, and in this society for everyone. Black lives matter, all lives matter, but no life matter if Black lives don't matter. So I'll end it with that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so I am going to move to Larry Jefferson, and I'm going to start by telling the audience a little bit about Larry. He's currently the supervising and senior attorney for the Superior Court at Thurston County Public Defense. This year, he was named Attorney of the Year and received the Daniel Bigelow Award from the Thurston County Bar Association. He's worked as a public defender in King and Thurston County since 1996, and he is a graduate of the Evergreen State College and Seattle University School of Law. He's currently president of the Washington Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and board member of the Campaign for Equal Justice. He is a devoted father of two wonderful adult children and a self-proclaimed mama's boy. I'm just going to put that out there. And he enjoys spending time transforming justice. And apparently at his barbecue and cheering for the Seahawks. So I'm going to turn this over to Larry for his time, and I will signal you when as requested.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor, and it is such a pleasure to be with all of you here in Olympia. I've been here since 1980. I'm a transplant from Evanston outside of Chicago. And I've known Dr. Jackson since I was about 11 or 12 years old, and it's just an honor to be with her and to hear her words and to have heard her words for a lot of my life. I work at Thurston County Public Defense, and I am a public defender. And I have represented many people here in Olympia. And we had these COVID-19 and these traumatic events that have all come to our attention, and something that we are all trying to take notice of and seeing how this affects our lives. But I just want to talk with you about something, and that's about safety, and that's about public safety. Everybody wants to be safe. Everybody wants to be able to leave their home, go to the grocery store, drive their car, go to work, and be safe. And so when you say the word public safety, people go, aha, I like public safety because I want to be safe. But what sometimes people don't understand is where that term came from and what it means. Because public safety has a history. You see, in this country, we like to have a blind spot about our history. And if you don't know your history, then you're doomed to repeat it. So what do I mean about public safety? And why would public safety be a bad thing? Well, we all know that slavery is wrong. We've come to a consensus. We all know that Jim Crow is wrong, and we come to a consensus. And when Jim Crow was being defeated in the 50s, a counterbalance to that argument was about safety. All these people are rioting. We need to be safe. And so that argument of public safety led to the start of mass incarceration, to the drug war. And so if you could say public safety, that meant you didn't have to say race-baiting words, but you could still talk to your base to get them to pass laws. And you could get them to pass laws on all sorts of levels, misdemeanors, felonies, what have you. And those laws reflect the racism of the rest of our society. I like you to imagine an iceberg floating in the sea. And as you have the iceberg, I'd like you to imagine criminal law is at the type of that iceberg. That's what's sticking out. But what you don't see with criminal law is underneath the water is all of the systemic racism in every other part of our society. That would be housing. Do your history on housing and know how segregated we are based on housing. Segregation in education, employment, healthcare, the wealth gap. I can go on and on and on. All of those things are below the water. And so what we have with criminal law is that's where we see the enforcement arm for systemic racism. That's why I can recall as a young man being scared. I changed my activities here in Olympia, Washington, so I didn't go outside. Because if I went outside, it meant I'd meet the police. So I changed the type of things I like to do, so I didn't go outside. So I could be safe, all right? That should not happen. And so what we need to do is no longer be a colorblind society. Because I want you to imagine another iceberg. And that iceberg comes up out of the water, and that is called crime. And so what we need to do is to look beneath that iceberg so that we can see the history. We have to know the history of our people. So I'm going to sum up, and I want to say I'm going to say four things. Number one, racism is real, and it's a we thing. It's not an I thing or a you thing. It's a we thing. Number two, money is injustice. All right. So if something costs money in order to be just, is not justice. Number three, we need to listen to the voices of our people, because those voices will tell us what we need to do. And last of all, what I want to say is we're going to have a difficult conversation, but I know we can do this. And I want you to ask me how I know we can do this, because it's actually, some of it is being done. So with that, I will cede my time. Thank you so much.
Got it. That's one. You're muted. All right. And so I get to introduce David Owens. David is a partner in Lovey, a civil rights firm, but his practice is national. He represents clients in Washington and California, in Wisconsin and Illinois, and throughout the South. He is an advocate on behalf of those seeking vindication for the violation of their civil rights, and focuses on cases involving wrongful convictions, police shootings, and other excessive force, false arrests, free speech rights, race discrimination, and other violations of the U.S. Constitution. He is also involved in extensive litigation in seeking redress for those wrongly convicted under Washington's Wrongfully Convicted Persons Act. David is a lecturer in law at the University of Chicago, where he teaches in the school's pro bono wrongful conviction clinic, the Exoneration Project. And he's dedicated to pro bono work, which I'm going to keep in the back of my mind because I might need a lawyer one day, David. He serves as a member of the Coalition for the Fair Sentencing of Youth in Illinois. He represents juveniles who have been given life sentences but are now entitled to new sentencing hearings under the Miller versus Alabama case. And he represents claimants in proceedings before the Illinois Torture Inquiry Commission. As David mentioned earlier, he's up the road. He's born and raised up the road in Auburn. He got his undergraduate degree from the University of Washington, and later earned his law degree and an MA in philosophy from Stanford University. So I'm going to turn it over to you, David.
Well, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and I feel a little bit awkward being here just because I want to hear what Ms. Jackson and Mr. Jefferson have to say, and I'm really honored to be a part of this discussion. And, you know, I think a lot of this resonates with a lot of people right now because we are in a quarantine. We're all looking at our Zoom and all of those things. And, you know, what happened with George Floyd was not an isolated event. And what happened, you know, I see it in my practice, in my life. And I think one really, really big, fundamental, difficult issue when you're trying to solve problems in society is they can't be solved if you don't acknowledge what they are. And where they started and where they came from. And so one of the biggest things that I think has been challenging for me, myself, as a person who grew up in Auburn and in the Northwest, and then when I got to the University of Washington, I was like, what are these guys talking about with systemic racism? Like, this is BS. I've done everything myself on my own. Sure, there's some of these moments in my life that have been kind of racist, you know, when I go to rural Washington places. But I mean, come on, guys, like, you guys need to calm down. And the thing that I realized, and I think that's so difficult about this moment and about this conversation, is that even the way in which we perceive the world has been conditioned to believe that the racism only exists in explicitly racist acts. And so I'm sitting here confronting different things that I'm evaluating in my life, and the way in which my thinking itself is structured by systems of power that were created to preserve slavery. And so, and then when you step back and you think about it, you know, kind of with the hypothetical, you realize it's actually all pretty obvious. So the way I think of it is like this. So imagine we're all running this race, and the difference is that for one group of people, well, they are literally carrying chains in the race and carrying all of the gear for the other people. And then that goes on for a long time and a long time and a long time. And so one group gets more and more gear. They're like at REI, plus, and the others are just, you can carry our stuff, but you're falling further and further behind. And if that race went on for years and years and years, and one group falls further and further behind, and then you just take the chains off and say, all right, keep running. We're still running the same race. There's no way in which that you would expect those people who've been held back for so long to ever have the chance to catch up. Now, if you continue the analogy here in the United States and other places in the world, is that it's not only where we like, oh, we're just letting go of the chains, but we're actually also going to institute other obstacles along the way. And then you start to realize, oh, this thing, it's just a continuation. And so now here we are in 2020. And so the way in which we think about policing, the way in which we think about criminal justice, the way in which we think about crime is all a result of these things. And it's extremely uncomfortable because all of us, I think, like Mr. Jefferson said, want public safety. Who doesn't want to be safe? Who doesn't want to be secure in their homes? That's what the Fourth Amendment says, the right to be secure in your homes. It's a fundamental thing that we all want. And things like institutional racism are terrifying because it means that we have to change our institutions. And we have to recognize that the things that have gotten us to where we're at, the things that make us feel safe at home and with our families and with people we love, and even in communities of people who are not white, who have been the victims of racism, there's resistance there too because it means change, and that's why it's so difficult. So I'm happy and honored to be here and part of this conversation today.
Okay. I know I'm going to be the one that has to always be told I'm off mute. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was astounding. So you guys got to hear some fantastic things. So at this point, we're going to welcome questions from the attendees to the panelists. This is a difficult conversation, but so we do ask that we keep our communication with each other respectful and kind. I don't know why that keeps coming up when I'm doing this, but it does. So just as a matter of housekeeping, you'll see at the bottom of your screen a Q&A button. If you click on that, that is where you can type in your question. And I, as the moderator, will look at the questions and read them off to the panelists for them to answer. I will, because I can, to save time, if there are common themes or common questions, I will combine them. I will reframe questions for clarity if I see it, and it's just to make sure it's clear for the panelists. And if I think a question calls for a follow-up, I'm happy to do that. As a reminder, because the City Council is here, the full council is here, I want to remind folks that the council is here, much like the attendees, to host and to listen, to learn along with the community. So if you have questions for the council, I encourage you to email them to the council email at citycouncil@ci.olympia.wa.us, because questions won't be directed to the council in this platform. So with that, I'm going to start off with a question, and then I'm going to, because I can see the questions coming in, I think, first of all, while I look at those questions, I'd like you guys to, so there's not a lull, I would like you guys to talk about the thing that is sort of popping up, the term that's popping up through this whole Black Lives Matter movement, that you hear it in the air. It's kind of the zeitgeist. It's defund the police. I'm hoping that you guys can explore that, break it down. What does that actually mean? What does that look like? Whoever would like to go first, or whoever would like to speak to that.
Well, I'll speak on. I personally, I am not in support of defunding the police as I hear the definition of what that calls for. When I need public safety or need, and I call the police, I want them to come. And the discussions around defunding the police is more along the lines of the police state that has developed, the militaristic aspect of policing that has come into play. The whole appearance of police, the use of force, and all of these things that have evolved over time, and all of the money that's thrown towards police and criminal justice and that whole industry, and how it's gotten out of control. And policing, as people talk about it in terms of public safety, we are so far removed from that now. So I use the term to defund the police from my own definition versus the various definitions that are out there. As Larry said, and David, we want public safety. But the conversation that all of this has conjured up is what do we want policing to look like in our communities, and a redefinition of what that's like. And we have asked police to do a lot of things that were never intended. And so how do we make sure that the issues they're faced with, the mental health of people that they're expected to address, just a whole bunch of things. So to shift the funding to the areas that aren't being met in other ways that we're asking police to now do, similar to what we're asking teachers to do in schools. And so my thought about defunding the police, we need to really start that conversation with a basic conversation on definition, so that we can be together in what we mean by the term defunding the police, because it means different things to different people.
Yeah, and I would agree with Ms. Jackson that we use the police for too many things. If we think about the incident with George Floyd, which I think was about a forged check, there shouldn't be police showing up with handcuffs about a forged check. It's not what would be termed a violent offense. We're using the police for way too many things. And so we need to get police. I want to get police to where firemen are. Everybody's excited when a fireman shows up, means a cat's in the tree. Or, you know, somebody's having a problem, the firemen come up, they do it, boom, 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 you're happy. That's where we need to get police. The police came to my home the other day that I knew, but my neighbors were scared for me, but I knew the police. So we've got to get the police and the community have to do a good job of redefining the role on what needs to happen.
I agree completely. And I think for community members here who are here and sort of, you know, it's so bizarre. You're like, defund the police? What's wrong with you? How could I do something that sounds crazy? And all I think, and so what I think folks in the movement or in myself and others, and I don't really know a good way to describe this yet, we need another slogan. But the concept is simply stop spending millions and millions of dollars on militarizing the police and start investing it in communities. And the communities that in ways that will reduce crime, make people safe. And, you know, so what we've learned through this pandemic is that it turns out that our economy is very vulnerable. And so when economic things happen and people are homeless, you know, crime grows up. So imagine you take away the pandemic and there's still homelessness, there's still poverty, and there's not resources for folks. That drives crime up. And so these are not policing issues. Or another issue related to homelessness. Many people, a super majority of the homeless population have mental health issues, including many veterans who fought hard for this country in various wars. And everybody agrees we should take care of our veterans. But the people who should be taking care of them are not criminal justice criminal responses. It should be a community response that addresses the underlying mental health issue. And so we reduce the idea and the area for which crime has jurisdiction and what criminal justice does. So we want to reduce the scope of that. So, for example, defund the police is not about abolishing the police department. So some people have that idea, but I think the general consensus is this: it's inappropriate for teachers to have to buy their own school supplies while simultaneously police officers are like, I'll take another tank, gotta go, you know. And so where you put your money where your mouth is, and that's what this is really about, is it's saying maybe we've got allocated a little bit too much to militarization and to violence, and we want to reduce that role. And I'll never forget it, because as a person whose daytime job is to sue police officers, when the officers were shot in Dallas, you know, the chief of police for Dallas came out and he said, we can't do everything. We can't be mental health. We can't solve homelessness. We can't solve all of these problems. And what it is just resources. So maybe we could just call it reallocate the resources to communities that need it, other than just the police for killing people. We're working on a slogan, but that, I think, is the idea behind it.
I figured out how to mute myself. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's great. I am, like, we got a lot of questions around specifically kind of the theme of what can I do to make things better? What can I do to be a catalyst for change? That's sort of a theme I see running through some of these questions. Can you guys speak to that around what folks in the audience, what people in our community might do to actually take part and make change?
Can I go out on a limb and just maybe start with this one, y'all? Is that cool?
That's cool.
All right, thank you. So let me just suggest 3 really basic things. First, have humility. And when I say that, I mean, we all need to have humility, because these are challenging topics, and these are things that are causing us to reframe the way in which we think about issues of race and racism. And then second, related to that, is there's this idea of going, not just being like, I'm opposed to racism, but becoming affirmatively anti-racist. And what that means is, when you see things in the community, when you see things where even you pick it out, we don't just sit by complicitly and just expect it to solve itself. You acknowledge it and we challenge those systems. And then so the third thing is going to be a little bit more amorphous, but I do think that it has directly to do with trying to, as Mr. Jefferson said, get information. And we're here to talk today about the criminal justice system. And I think supporting reform in the criminal justice system that, as I just said, decreases the area or the landscape of criminality, so that when there's disputes or problems that arrive in society, we can pressure our legislators, our cities to not treat those with criminal forces, but to respond to them in other means. And here's a perfect example. You know, a couple generations ago, if kids got in fights at school, they break it up. Maybe you got to go to detention or something like that, and it happened. And then when I was growing up, if kids got in fights in school, you know, you're suspended for a day or two. Now, if a kid gets in a fight in school, the police are called, there's assault charges, the kid is removed from their schooling, and all of these things. And so we want to decrease the area in which criminal justice has to play, because once folks enter that system, it becomes harder and harder for them to reach out. And so those are the, I think, very tangible ways to support that. And also, I have to give a plug for the Washington Innocence Project, since I'm on their board, is to look at wrongful convictions and how they happen and why they happen. It will tell us a lot about the criminal justice system and basic flaws in it.
Okay.
I guess what I would say is, go to the bookstore, lots of books. Read the new Jim Crow. This will give you the history of how we got here in the age of mass incarceration. I would also say, remember my number one thing I said was that racism is real and it's a we thing. All right. Somehow, I think we've been taught that it's actually sort of okay to admit that you're sexist. Like no dude will just totally get killed because they're sexist. But if you admit that you are racist, people will go, oh my God, you're a racist. And so I think what we need to remember is that all people are good. We all make mistakes. And that when someone brings up that you may have made a mistake about whether you're sexist or whether you're racist, they're actually honoring you. They're actually taking time out of their day to make sure that the next time that you say something, that you would think about it and get it right. The other thing that you can do is do a lot of self-reflection about issues of racism with things within yourself. We've all been taught things about Black people that are lies and that are not true. And to go back and think about those things and unlearn them. Because it just so happens we're all beautiful and we're all good. Thanks.
I would just add to that when people approach me, and I've certainly been approached a lot lately, what can I do? What can we do as a community? What's my responsibility? And, you know, I respond quite often by talking about the fact that the silence and complicity of most white people have been deafening, absolutely deafening about matters of racism, discrimination, inequities, and unfair treatment at every level of society. And so when an individual asks me, what can they do? I say, you need to start speaking up. You need to start speaking out. Regardless of what platform you have at your disposal, whether it's your church, your organization, your community, your family, wherever it is, speak up and speak out. You can't be silent anymore, because that silence is complicity with what's going on. And the current protests that we've been witnessing really bring about that kind of awakening that's begun to happen in the lives of many people. And so it starts with us as individuals, and then it moves out into the community. And a big part of that is educating oneself, as Larry indicated, and then David talking about the 3 things that could happen here. But there's a lot all of us can do as individuals. We bring our sum total of our experiences to where we are today. And having grown up in the Deep South under Jim Crow laws, having been segregated in all Black schools, having gone to an HBCU, I bring somewhat of a different lens to the conversation when people ask about these things. And so I have to practice patience. I have to practice tolerance in answering, you know, when I find an open mind that's willing to discuss and to talk. And dialogue such as this that the city of Olympia is engaging in, and the city of Lacey is doing a similar kind of thing. We began to open it up. We began to acknowledge that, first of all, there is a problem. We've got to stop denying. We've got to stop pretending as though these things aren't real. They are very real. And once we do that, and once we begin to share stories, once we begin to share experiences, we can begin to talk about what are we doing that we need to do differently? What changes do we need to make? What policies do we need to impact? How can we make sure that this transformational change takes place? And only through dialogue and better understanding of one another is that going to happen. So individually, do what you can do. Collectively, do what you can do. But together, we can begin to make these changes.
And I just want to add 2 examples. One time when I was in high school, I was walking across a local football field, and they all decided to call me a nigger. That wasn't right. But the person that was with me stood up for me, and they defended me. And you know what I did? I married that person, because you don't find people who do that for you very often. The second thing I would tell you is that one day I was at work and I was doing video record, and a client came in, and the client was pretty much mentally ill, but the client came in and they called me a nigger. I didn't like that. And I said, you're out of here. These 4 white hands came and grabbed that man and made him disappear. And so what I would say is that every Black man and every Black woman needs 4 white hands that would just come up, and anybody call you that, they just disappear. It made my life a lot better. And you know who I like a lot better? I like Thurston County correction officers a lot better, because they had my back. And that's what we need to do with one another. You see something, have someone's back.
Right. Thank you for that. I think this connects with another question. And I'm going to apologize to the audience. With 300 people, we are getting a lot of questions, and I am not going to get to them all. But I just want to thank you for your engagement. But listening to what you just said, I think this particular question, with the final kind of minute or so we have around this, we've got enough to answer this. And this is about the exhaustion of racism. The question is, how are you maintaining wellness and sustaining your work that you do with just the weight of racism in the world, in your life?
If I could start off here, what I did was about 8 to 10 years ago, I started counseling. And I probably do it 2 or 3 times a week. And it has changed my life. So it allows me to not sort of react in the moment sometimes when I think something racist is happening to me, so that I can react with my full faculties. So as long as I'm doing sort of that maintenance work, and I've got to do it weekly. If I don't do it weekly, the stuff starts to fall apart. So that's something that's really changed my life. It also helped with my listening skills. And if I listen to my clients, they start to get better results. If I listen to my loved ones, I start having better family. And if I'm listening to people, when they bring up something, I'm better able to deal with the situation. So that's what I've been able to do. But also it connecting with your spiritual core, I think, is also very important to do in something like that, and maintaining that on a regular basis. So that's what I do.
I'll comment on that. As I stated, I'm the older one of the group, 74 years old, and it is exhausting. It is tiring. And I described the climate under which I grew up. So I've been traumatized a long time by the racism that's been there. But you have to learn to cope. You have to learn resiliency skills. You have to learn to maneuver through all of those obstacles and that maze. Otherwise, you'd be a mental health case yourself. And it really does build character from the point of view of really having to understand who you are and whose you are, and from whence you have come, and the strength that is ingrained in your very DNA. And it really equips you to deal with a lot of things that a lot of other people ordinarily wouldn't. And as I hear David describing having grown up in the Pacific Northwest and the trauma he went through when he went through the University of Washington. Well, I grew up in the Deep South, as I said. So that was a different set of lenses and a different set of experiences that prepared me for what I've been subjected to for most of my adult life. When I graduated from Southern University, the HBCU in Louisiana, and recruited to work on the Harper project here in the state of Washington, which has got me to the Northwest to start with. The cultural change, the geography change, the weather change. I mean, talk about transformation. But I am convinced that my upbringing in the South and the knowledge that I gained and the segregation of my life prepared me for the integration that I had to become a part of. And so I was clear in who I was. It had been drilled in me that I had gifts and talents and skills and brilliance, and that I knew how to cope. And I had no feelings of inferiority when, as a 21-year-old Black female, I'm really experiencing white folk for the first time in my life. But I was prepared. I was prepared. And so that got me through. And it started me on a journey of sharing what I know and what I had learned. And as you tick off that long list of activities and involvement, I grew up being prepared for leadership. I grew up being challenged to speak up and speak out. And so, but that's what I brought to it. And that's how I've been able to manage the race-based trauma and the kind of things that could really be overwhelming if I were not as grounded as I am, based upon that kind of loving village upbringing that I was blessed to get.
I don't mean to not answer the question, but I'm not going to answer this question directly. So I understand this Zoom is being put on by the city of Olympia and lots of folks in Thurston County. And actually I have a trial coming up in Thurston County. And I think perhaps, and you can stop me if you'd like, one thing that I think is important about this question actually goes back to the first question of people saying, how can I help? What's going on? And the question of like, well, how do you deal with race fatigue? Why is this so tiring for you? I want to actually just address that and what it means for there to be fatigue about these ideas and issues of race, at least from my own experience, but I think for a lot of other people of color and Black people, because, you know, I grew up, as I said, in Auburn. I listened to hardcore music. I went to an all-white church. I surf. That's the real answer, is I go surfing. And I'm here in Westport, which is, you know, in Grays Harbor County right now. But those are the things I do. But I think that maybe the more important thing for folks who are like, how do I help? How do I call or contact my weary Black friend? And why is my weary Black friend so tired? How does this bear on you? Is because when these events happen, here's the fundamental thing about racism from my perspective is this. I didn't choose this. I didn't choose it at all. My mom is white. My dad is Nigerian, but everything in my life, people treat me differently. I am even with my own brother, who is completely white. There's all of these things that happen, events. I'm on a road trip with my friends. Things happen when I'm there. They don't happen when they're not there. When you're in a meeting and you're the only person who looks like this, I don't think I'm that different. I worked hard, I got good grades, I did everything I was supposed to do, but there's this thing that I cannot escape, even if I want to, or even if I try. And so when you understand and go through your life being like, oh man, this is really not about me. And it is about this thing that's beyond me. At Stanford Law School, I'm getting pulled over on my bicycle. And they're like, oh, we think a bike like this is stolen around here. And I was like, I developed a routine for what would happen when I would get pulled over. I would accidentally hand the officers my Stanford Law ID and be like, okay, let me find my driver's license. Because these are the types of things that are fatiguing. But that's not the only fatigue. And this is the thing I want to impress and why I mentioned humility. It is every conversation that you've ever had with your one Black friend about race. It is every time that I see a police officer, is he going to shoot me or is he going to give me a positive wave? And being the person who has to bear the burden of all of this tension at every moment is exhausting. And I appreciate what you're saying, Ms. Jackson. I think in some ways being in the Northwest is harder than being in the South. I lived in Montgomery, Alabama for a year, and it was like, Klan member hates me. all the other people over there. And then there's just like your liberal white friends who are like, I'm an ally, you know it. Because in the Northwest, here's the problem. We're known for being passive aggressive. And what that means is you don't talk about what's really going on underneath the ground. You don't talk about these things unless there's an extreme thing like the Klan has done something. But how is it possible that there's all of this racial fatigue that we might be tired about when everybody's being so nice? Oh, hi, things like that. It's not just an Eastern Washington issue. It's not just the Klan, but it's in all of these moments where there's fatigue, there's nervousness, it's being called on to ask to be, well, you have a Black perspective, you know, and just because of my skin color doesn't mean I have all of the answers. And so these are the types of things that are there for fatigue. So I think going back to the very first question where we started, how can you be an ally? And I mentioned being anti-racist, but I also mentioned trying to have humility and understanding, because it's just understanding that you don't get it. Understanding that you don't get it and you don't see it. And that's the first set of acknowledgement. And so different people respond different ways. I'm gonna go surfing after this and we'll sort of wash this off. But I think, you know, maybe it's helpful for this conversation, because it seemed to me if I were sort of like I want to help, I want to be an ally, to even understand what that fatigue is can be somewhat of a challenge. And I think if you're coming from this with a place of humility and respect for others and your friends, as opposed to sort of a token type of a thing, then there's space for that understanding and being an ally.
Thank you. All right. This is the moment where I ask my question, the moderator question. And I gave it to you early so y'all could chew on it a little bit. And our time is clicking away, so I want to ask it. What does long-term sustainable change look like, and what's the work ahead to get there?
Well,
Who's going first?
I want to go first on this one. And one of my points was, we can win, we can do this, and we can do it together. But I want you to let you know something. We already started. We started before George Floyd. Somebody in the city of Olympia decided to start the Familiar Faces program. And that program is working downtown and is connecting with people at the peer support level. So the officers are identifying people that they think would need some help and assistance. Sometimes it's even people that the officers think, I don't know how we could help that person or that they'd be responsive, but I'm gonna send this person anyways. And they develop relationships, and those relationships go over the years. So what that does see, the criminal justice system doesn't provide a peer support person. The criminal justice system doesn't help someone do laundry, learn how to pay for their own cigarettes. The level of dysfunction that some folks have, they need a lot of help. And so this Familiar Faces program is connected to the Olympia Police Department. And so I know about this program personally and professionally. And so I don't know what it means when you can have a Black man that is happy about seeing a Olympia police car. How can that happen? In 1980, when I moved here, I would have been scared. I would have said, I'm going the other way. I am hiding. And in fact, one time I took my little bicycle and tried to get away from one on my own eluding case on a bicycle, and they caught me. Now, police officers are jumping out of the car, hugging me, because we have worked together to change people's lives. So what I want you to know is we're doing this, and we're getting the funding. The Familiar Faces won an award for what they're doing. So they're touching people's lives who have suffered all of these harms their whole life through all of these structural inequalities. And they're not doing it necessarily on race, and they're doing it on who needs help. So what we got to do, help those who need help. And because of the structural nature of our society, it's going to wind up being a Black person, because there's so much help that we need. And I just want to say about the trauma, it is so hard to go through a whole white school alone. It's so hard to go through college alone. It's so hard to work alone, and you got to figure it out all on your own. And if you don't figure it out, they kick you out. I got lucky enough that I figured it out. I don't want people to have to get lucky enough to figure it out. I wanted to figure it out because someone, when they were 5 or 6 or 7, told them that they were special, told them that they could be somebody. What if I had gotten that message? I already won Attorney of the Year, but my teacher didn't believe in me because they looked at me and they saw something different. So I guess those are the comments that we can do this. I just want you to know we can do this, and I'm dedicated to doing this. I live here. I want to change it, and I want to change it with you, everybody who's on here. Even if you disagree with me, I want to love you. I want to learn how to love you, and I want to love you more. Because if we do that, I think we'll get rid of some racism because I will love you, and you'll love me, and we'll be happy. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry. Anyone else?
Well, that's a great simplistic approach to take to it, Larry. And if we can just get to that place, we would be so much better off. But when we talk about long-term sustainable change and what that needs to look like, we've got to begin to be very intentional and very deliberate and very committed when we describe the kind of community we want to live in, that we want to raise families in, that we want our children to be educated in. And that's going to take some deep dialogue and discussion because we are so far from being there at this point. I'll be participating on one of the later forums talking about education. And it's so intertwined where America has miseducated everybody. Schools were not geared up to educate us and out to educate about us. And that has led to so many of these problems that we're talking about. But we've got to look at policy. We've got to look at structures. We've got to look at practices because we do a lot of things in society that has nothing to do with policy. It's just been done a certain way for so long that everyone assumes it's a policy being carried out, but not necessarily so. But we've got to be deliberate in looking at that. And as we're focusing today on the criminal justice system and racial injustice, what are some of those things that really need to be examined so we can do it differently? And that takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and more than anything else, it takes a lot of will and commitment. And so that's where we're going to make some long-term sustainable change and not run the risk that all of this attention now and dialogue now doesn't become just another fleeting moment in response to the times in which we're living. But to sustain it and to do it differently is going to call for transformational change. That is some serious business and some very hard work.
Thank you. David?
I'm reticent to say anything after that because I think it is very serious. It's very hard work. Some folks, there's books to read out there. One is, as Larry mentioned, is Just Mercy by a man named Bryan Stevenson. And I think, if you look at what Bryan has said about this moment and about this time and sort of what I've been saying today, and go look at Equal Justice Initiative, and they have a museum about lynchings and a racial history justice museum about lynchings. And the reason that Bryan has focused and spent so much time trying to unearth these things is because it's part of the history and it's part of the understanding. And so, for example, if you said, how do we be healthy? And you're like, well, I got cancer. And you're like, no, but I want to focus on your diet. I want to focus on are you exercising enough? And you're like, well, but I have cancer. And so, well, yeah, but until we as a society admit that there is a cancer, one, we call it a cancer, and two, we treat it as one, and we treat it as one that was ignored for a while, we can never solve the ultimate problem. And it turns out, like cancer, getting to the root cause of racism and addressing it is like chemotherapy. I had to stop myself from swearing. It hurts. And it's not going to be fun. It is going to be painful, right? But so the long-term solution here is we're never going to be able to address these fundamental issues until we agree that they're fundamental issues. Now we can have a conversation. All right, the slavery ended, and then there was Jim Crow, and then there's policing, and how does all of this work together? How is the way in which we think about police, and how is the way I think about safety related to slavery? And so that's the very first thing that we have to do. We have to have tough, frank conversations about this cancer, and then we have to sort of seeing it as cancer, not sort of some scratch or side issue. We have to begin to attack it in the way that you would any other serious illness. And so I think that's a fundamental, that's the way forward. And I agree completely. It is hard, and it looks like rethinking the way you think. And I'm afraid of that, but it's happened. It's happened to me this year, and I think as we're all making our own baby steps forward, we have to embrace that change because we know the goal is this: kill cancer.
Great. All right. So we're at the point where if there are any final thoughts you want to put out there before we turn it back to council.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Larry?
No more thoughts from me. I've said enough.
Larry?
Well, it's hard to turn down such a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak. But I already thought I gave my final thoughts, so
Okay.
I'm just gonna leave it
Right.
with that. There, of course, there's so many more things that I want to say because racism isn't gone yet. But I will end where I ended. Thank you.
Thank you all. I want to remind the audience that this event has been recorded. It will be posted on our website. It'll also be rebroadcast on TC Media. There have been we got like 61 questions, and as you saw how few we were able to get to. But some of those questions were for council, and we will be collecting those and moving those, transferring them to council as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Selby.
Thank you, Kellie. And thank you again to our amazing panelists for sharing your insights and time and treasure with us, your treasured comments with us. Larry, Thelma, and David, thank you so much. I'm going to make a brief comment, and then we'll do a round robin with the council. So I'm glad you recognize that we had really, I think, close to 100 questions, and we were all madly trying to read them while we were listening, and noticed that a lot of them were geared towards the council, and the purpose of these forums is more about us listening at this point, so that when we do dig in on the work, we have the voices of the panelists in our ears and our community members. We'll have a record of the questions that we will be compiling and working from for future discussion. One of the things I heard that spoke deeply to me was that we are now in this very intentional stage of making change, and we're committed to that, but it's going to be long-term, and we want it to be sustainable and transformative. So I know it's frustrating because people want all the answers now, but that would be a disservice to the process. I also want to acknowledge how difficult it is to have these conversations in a Zoom format. We will be hopefully able to do some other work as we form the charter of the soon-to-be named Human Rights Commission, but I think we're going to be changing the name of that. But we want to make that more of a participatory leadership process like we did with our homeless response planning, so we can break out in smaller groups and really listen to people and have more scribes taking down everyone's thoughts. So again, we're asking for people's patience as we work through 400 years of a broken system. And so with that, I also just want to say that a favorite quote of mine that speaks to me right now is from Robert F. Kennedy, and he said, "Just because we cannot see clearly the end of the road, that is no reason for not setting out on the essential journey." So I want to thank everybody on this screen and those listening for being with us as we start on this essential journey. So with that, I'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Jessica Bateman.
Thank you. Thank you, esteemed panelists, for your time and sharing your stories with us today and your perspective. It's really meaningful and powerful to hear. Because we're talking about the justice system, that's what my questions will be focused on, but I recognize that structural racism exists in all these different topic areas of healthcare, housing, et cetera, that feed into the justice system. And I really appreciated the comments that you made, David, about reduce the landscape of criminality, and also Larry, enforcement arm of which is the enforcement arm of racism and structural inequality. And so my question is, as we look out at a future where we have reduced that landscape of criminality and therefore reduce the enforcement arm of racism and structural inequality, do you know of, or have you, or places that are doing that well, are starting that journey, or what that looks like? And also organizations that are dedicated or on the forefront of that work that we could look to as examples, because it's a huge topic, and I'm just curious if you have thoughts about where that has begun.
I don't know so much about organizations, but I can give you an example. Marijuana used to be against the law here in the state of Washington. And so I would get cases all the time dealing with people Black people who were getting stopped for marijuana offenses. As soon as we got rid of that law, Black people stopped getting arrested for that. But also it was a starter. So once that got on their records would grow. So what my answer would be is decriminalize driving while license suspended in the 3rd degree. That's a starter. Have that be an infraction that's not arrestable. You still have to go to court, but it's an infraction. Change the drug laws. Don't have felony for possession. And maybe you shouldn't charge drug laws at all, because those people are ill. So if people are ill or sick, you treat it like a health issue, and those will have great effects. People are mentally ill. They don't belong in jail. So we need to grow that system so that people who are ill go to where people who are ill need to be, and not where police are, because ill people don't follow police orders. They just don't, because they're not well. So those would be my suggestions to reduce police should just be for violent stuff. Don't have them do anything else, because they're just on a task. They're going to be safe. They're going to be in, they're going to be out. That's what we need them to do. Just in and out, boom. And they have the other professionals do the stuff that people need to listen to. People need to be listened to. They've got a lot of stuff and a lot of trauma. And so you need people that just sit around and listen to people a lot. Thanks.
All right. Thank you for that. Councilmember Madrone? Oh, I think you froze. Are you there? Councilmember Madrone, did you have a comment or a question?
I don't. My internet connection's not very good right now. I'm actually going to turn off my video. I'm still here listening, but I'll go ahead and pass on asking something because I'm having trouble hearing.
Oh, so sorry. Okay, I'll go to Councilmember Gilman. You need to unmute. That's our third unmute.
It's just a little bit of a project to get unmuted. All right. First, thank you very much, Thelma, David, and Larry, for speaking to us this evening. I really appreciate it. And so I recognize that I will never know, and I will never feel or experience what you've experienced or what Black people in our community experience. But I have seen and heard and know enough to recognize that, like Larry said, I was taught lies growing up through school, that the system's unjust. And I've learned enough and I love you enough to have it be a priority to fight against these institutions and structures that perpetuate an idea that one skin tone is superior to another skin tone, that absurdity. So I'll be back to listen the next 3 Thursdays and continue having lots of conversations with folks and in this moment, centering Black voices in my learning. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for being here. And Kellie, thank you for organizing this.
All right, I've got Councilmember Rollins. Did you have a question or a comment for the panel?
You know, I was really interested here to learn more about the history of the phrase public safety. And I was wondering, either Larry's thoughts or Thelma's or David's about, in your conversations, whether that's one-on-one conversations with people about where that phrase comes from. Is there a better phrase that's more inclusive and that doesn't tap into that bad history, or is it kind of about reclaiming what safety, or like whose safety, or safety for everyone? Like I'm just looking at communication strategies here around this topic.
Is there anybody?
I think you raise a good point when you say whose safety, you know, and what is safety. And when you look at the historical underpinnings of all that, policing and public safety and all that goes quite a ways back and takes us all the way back to the time of enslaved people. The history of police, for people to understand how police ever came about to start with. And it's so much in the education of it and the history of it. And so many words do need to be redefined. And that would be one place we could start. The same as defund police or public safety. Where do those terms come from? And what does it now need to mean? And as opposed to what it has evolved into meaning. But public safety, whose safety? And what aspect of the public are we talking about? Because right now, it's not the public safety of all, it's the public safety of some. And you have these biases that talks about who are the others that the rest of the public need to be protected from. So we got to all that.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing. At the beginning of COVID, the Thurston County Jail had, I don't know the exact number, but we're talking like 350 people in it. It could be 300, but somewhere in that level. And they changed their admission policy because they didn't want people with COVID-19 to get in the jail. So they've reduced their criteria. And it just so happens, it's like, is it violent? Okay, they come in. Is it not violent? They don't come in. Let's continue that, okay? We don't need the nonviolent stuff in there because it reduces the population, less chance of getting sick. But you know what else is less? Less chance of getting fights, less chance of getting interactions with a corrections officer, all right? Because you get a young person, correction officer, doesn't follow the order, then you got an assault 3 on your hands, and that just matriculates. So don't take them in. Thanks. And we're, I wanted to say, and we're still safe. Like we've reduced the population, but the whole city didn't fall over. It's still there.
That's where I was going to go with it. I don't see there's a massive crime spike. So
it doesn't mean that there isn't things that are wrong and people need to be arrested for, and that we want the police to do that. I want the police to arrest people who need to be arrested, but we need to shorten the pool, and then we need to learn the history of the folks who are getting arrested. See, right now, it doesn't gain the system anything to learn someone's history. But if you learn their history, you will learn why they are doing what they're doing, and then you can give them the need. right? So we need to emphasize, we want to learn about you because we all want to come back to dinner. So we don't want to send people away forever anymore. We got too many prisons. We don't need them. We need people to be able to come back to dinner so we don't have two different societies, those that have and those that don't. We don't need to make a felony offense get rid of your right to vote or your right to participate in society, because we want us all to participate. So we bouncing these ideas back and forth, all right? Because we got to hear from our people. Thank you.
Thank you. David, did you have any comments on this topic?
I think it's been well covered. I know we're limited time here. I think the only perspective I guess what I'm sort of sitting here thinking about is, I know that there are many law enforcement officers in attendance today. And I know that too often the idea of policing in safety is, there's like this idea of, well, it's an adversarial relationship. I'm an attorney, I fight things in court. And when we talk about public safety, or whatever word you want to use, I think it's important to realize that there are dangerous things, and that there's a role for the police. I guess it's sort of like this. Part of what I'm getting at is there's an assumed dangerousness of certain people, or an assumption that that crime works only in some way, and so I think these are fundamental questions that have to be asked, and it changes the role of policing. So I just think it's an interesting thing when you just look at pictures, look at pictures of the police 50 years ago, and then look at pictures of the police in a militarized force. And so once people put on armor, it's because they're expecting a fight. And so we need to de-armorize folks, to reduce that. It's kind of like just a de-escalation thing, and not in the sense of like use of force training de-escalation. I mean de-escalation across the board. And I think that's kind of what, it's like the end of a war, a détente. We got to relax the tensions. But part of that has to do with understanding why people are hurting and where they're hurting from.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Parsley, did you have a question or a comment? Well, you're gonna have to unmute. That's 4.
Oh, it's 4? I said 15, so.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I look at all the notes I took, and I'm just going to summarize what I've heard and promise that I will stay open. And I recognize my own biases and racism. 3 years ago, Dr. Karen Johnson helped hold up a mirror in front of me, and I realized my liberal white self, I really wasn't without racism, without bias, and I have been working on it. And I suspect it will be a lifelong journey for me. So I just want to promise that to everybody that comes into the conversation. And I will try to be humble and come with humility and listen. And the best way I can do that sometimes is close my mouth and open the ears. But I want to just repeat back a few things that I heard. We have to be very intentional in our moves in the city, very committed. This is going to take us a long time. And we have to be deliberate, and we have to have these deep dialogues and conversations as we move forward. We have to ask ourselves, in terms of social justice, what is public safety? And that's something that we can define, and we can move forward. And as Larry said, we've already got a good start. We've got some good things going right now in Olympia. Let's build from that, and let's build from love, right, Larry? We can do this if we come with respect, as David said, for each other, and acknowledge that we have a problem. We have a cancer. I'm an oncologist. I get that. I understand that. We have a cancer. We have to fix it. And when you fix something this ingrained, it will hurt. It will be hard. And it will take a lot of work and commitment to make it get done. And we have to be patient, because it can't be fixed in one summer of our awakening.
Thank you. Thank you. So at this time, we're coming in just at 90 minutes. And again, I just want to thank everybody and ask for your grace and patience as we work through these town halls. We understand that there were a lot of questions that we didn't get answered in this brief time together, but we will take that with us into our ongoing work as a council. I know, I don't know a lot anymore with this last 6 months. Everyone's crystal ball's been broken and everyone's magic wand has been taken away. So what I do know is that this council is committed to this work. We are sincere and definitely are all hands on deck on working with our community so that we can make it safe and welcoming for all. I want to remind people at this time that we do have 3 more town halls coming up. The one next Thursday is again at 4 o'clock, and it will be racial justice and its relationship to economic opportunity or lack of economic opportunity. Racial justice and the healthcare system will be our topic on Thursday, August 6th. And then our final town hall will be racial justice and the education system on Thursday, August 13th. All of those are at 4 p.m. You can sign up on the city's website. And I'm going to put somebody here on the spot from General Government Committee. I know I didn't ask you ahead of time to do a report out, but our General Government Committee is doing really, really important deliberations and work on this very topic. And I know last night you guys had a very good meeting, and there's some work that's going to be coming forward. I didn't know if Council Member Rollins, who's chair of General Government, I won't put you guys on the spot, but could you just brief the community in the last couple minutes we have on what we are doing in addition to the town halls?
Sure. So we did have a few items on our agenda last night that are relevant to mention here. One of them being we're going to be recommending moving forward with a participatory leadership process for what had been called a Human Rights Commission. Right now, the placeholder name is Social Justice and Equity Commission. So a community participatory process to help scope and define what that commission would be doing, what the authority would be doing, what the scope would be. So that will be coming forward for council approval, that process along. Additionally, we will be recommending, and this will be coming up at the council meeting, I guess the next council meeting, which is in almost 3 weeks, but to go ahead and move forward with the hiring process for a police auditor. We're going to be going with the job description as currently exists, which was originally developed back in 2002, and take the time over the next year to rethink what that description could do, and maybe, potentially even have an auditor that works with a civilian review board of some kind. So those are a couple items. We'll also be going out for recruiting for a pool of community members to serve as part of critical incident response team for the Olympia community if and when police critical incidents occur, to be part of that investigation process.
Thank you. Again, I apologize for putting you on the spot.
You're all good.
That's really, really good information for our community to understand that we're working this from all different angles. And so anyhow, with that, also just want to remind people we are still in a pandemic. And so please be safe out there, wear your mask, wash your hands. We want to see you all safe and healthy when we can all finally get together again. And again, thanks to our panelists, and look forward to working with you. Put your hat back on. Look forward to working with you as we move forward. All right. Bye.
Thank you.